Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast. This is your host, Brittany, and today we're joined by Lane from Mold-Dog-Knows. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Mold-Dog-Knows, I found out about you guys on social media, scrolling as always before bed, and I'm like, ooh, what's this dog doing? And it was a video of a dog sniffing around a house for mold. And if I remember correctly, the video I saw, the dog actually alerted to mold being present.
Yes.
And, living in Florida, that's huge because you constantly hear people having to go through mold remediation or having mold issues. And so, very excited to hear everything about you guys and what you guys do. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization.
Sure. So I am the canine handler for Mold-Dog-Knows, and I work both with and for a functional medicine doctor. His name's Dr. Rodney Russell. And so because he treats mold patients every day, I also work with and for his wife. Her name's Susan. She's, classic mold sick. Just super sensitive, headaches, like mold brain, as she calls it, fatigue, MTHFR. So she's lived, that life. And Rodney treats patients like that. And then I have 13 years of law enforcement experience. In my last 5 years in law enforcement, I worked at Canine. So I have a lot of experience working dogs. So we're kind of like the dream team when it comes to this. And it got started because Susan was sick, and one of their friends had a mold dog come to their house. And so they were like, wait, a what? And so they had, before that, multiple inspection companies come out and do air sample tests, like 3 different ones. And 2 of them were like, oh, your house is clean. And one of them was like, well, I'm getting some reading, but still doesn't tell me where. So
Right.
that kind of kicked it off for them. They're like, well, why don't we have a mold dog come out? And they did. The dog found the mold. And so the rest is pretty much history.
Yeah, that's crazy. What dogs can do, it just keeps expanding and getting
Phenomenal.
wider and wider.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. So let's talk about mold and how it grows and where it normally grows, especially in houses.
Sure. So essentially, to break it down, it's a fungus, right? It's part of like the fungal family. So as it latches onto organic material, drywall, wood, those things like that, paint, it just essentially starts feeding off of it. And, being in Texas and Florida and, a lot of, really anywhere in the country, but obviously it's more prone to grow in more humid conditions and things like
hmm
that, you're going to get rapid growth. And so it'll start out as, one like genus or one species, and then as it keeps getting fed water and material, then it kind of transforms and, becomes, the black molds is like the kind of the hot term for it that
Right.
everybody thinks black mold. It's like, that's the bad thing. But really, we don't think any mold should be in your house. We consider, we get asked a lot, well, what kind of molds is your dog trained to alert on? And it's, any of the common that are considered like, toxic. But again, we don't think any mold is good mold, really, especially if you're sensitive to it. So
hmm And in your experience, is there a more common type of mold, which I don't even know the different classifications. I always hear just mold and black mold. That's really what you hear. So do you guys see a common type or strain or genus of it?
So what I do is when I get, some people will show me the reports, like, where they've done ERMIs or they've done air samples, and it's, it's come up with stuff like, I think the most kind of common that I see are your like aspergillus and your penicillins and your stachybotrices, your chatus. Those are like the chats and your stackies is what everybody calls them. Those are like your most common like black molds. They're very sticky. They're what's normally in a very wet environment.
Mm-hmm.
showers, things like that. So those are most common. Now in Texas, it's actually against the law to have a remediation company and an assessment company,
Oh,
which is good because you have conflict of interest, right?
right.
So we don't do any sampling. We don't do any testing. My dog is just searches the house and alerts, tells us, hey, this is an area of concern. I'm smelling mold odor. We work with an IEP, which is an indoor environmental professional. He's phenomenal. So I always recommend he goes in after us if people want to call him and schedule him to come out. Because
Mm-hmm.
there is something valid to having a human with, eyes and kind of logical reasoning, kind of look at a space and say, okay, the dog alerted here, but like, what are we looking at, right? Because I don't want to just my dog alerts on a bathroom vanity, and I can't just say tear it all out.
Right.
The wall's moldy. We got to figure out why, right? Is it
Mhm.
because the overflow drain in the sink is dirty, or what's the caulking look like on the backsplash? And is it water that's every time somebody's washing their hands and they're turning the faucet off, is water getting back behind there? So we do recommend an IEP coming after that, just because again, like we can't have a remediation company, which we don't want anyways, because we don't want
Right.
somebody thinking we're bringing our dog in and it's alerting on everything, and then here's your giant bill for remediation. So
Right. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
What are some of the clients that reach out to you? What are their big health issues or concerns?
So, I mean, it ranges, right? I did a client a couple weeks ago, and I always do kind of a consult when I go in. I don't just bring the dog up to the door. When I ring the doorbell, normally it's just me, and I think that kind of throws people off because they're like, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
where's the dog?" But I like to have people kind of walk me around, give me the story of the house, and some questions that I ask. I point some things out. I give them some preventative stuff to look at and kind of keep up with. But some people will tell me straight up, I don't have any symptoms. I'm not sick. They're like, my daughters are having you got like us do their house, and like we figured since you're down here, we might as well too. So sometimes I go into people's houses and they're not sick at all, and they just want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like, I knock on the door and they ask me to wear a mask, and they ask me to put shoe covers on my shoes because they're chronically ill. So I get a wide range.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from headaches to brain fog to quite literally bedridden, just
Oh, for
unable
sure.
to do anything to the point where it becomes a functional disability. And so I think we're starting to see a little bit more now. I'd say post COVID, I think we're a little bit more aware of everything, whether it be issues with mold and those toxins or our food and some of those toxins, which we won't get into that. But I think we're kind of coming a little bit more alert to some of the things that are making us sick or just interfering with our day to day.
Yeah,
And
people are waking up because I get a lot of people that are misdiagnosed, right? Their
yeah.
kids are diagnosed as autistic, and it's not autism, it's mold.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've heard of a story. A kid was like in, I think, fifth or sixth grade, played multiple sports. Parents moved into a home, and within like 6 months, the kid's in a wheelchair with a feeding tube.
Oh,
And they
wow.
end up finding out it was from mold. And thankfully, they found it and got it remediated, and the kid's back to normal, bounced back, and you would never know, but it's devastating to people, and it's life altering.
Hmm.
Can be.
Right. And as far as effects on a home, I think most of us think it's going to be obvious. It's going to be these big black spots or these water spots. But I would say, probably in your cases, more often than not, it's probably not that obvious to the eye, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So it can be anywhere, like we'll alert on a lot of bathtubs with the jacuzzi jets because people are like,
Mm,
those are gross, I don't use them. And we get alerts on there, or there will be a leak under those tubs, and obviously, like, you can't see it. Unfortunately, because I'm in real estate as well, and I'm a realtor, so I see it's like people aren't building homes as they should, or they're
right.
building them way too fast, and so they'll like they don't put any vapor barrier or membrane in the shower, and so then the pan's leaking, and obviously you're not going to see it. Sometimes you'll see the mold actually like growing through the grout because it's so bad. And those times, like, I'll open the shower door and my dog will like not even go in the shower. She just sticks her head in. She's like, it's here it is.
She's like, there's mold everywhere. I don't need to do anything
Yeah.
else.
Yep.
And
But
uh, can mold cause like structural damages if you don't eliminate it?
100%, yeah, because it's essentially eating the material. that it's living off of.
Hmm.
So it'll, start eating drywall, eating wood, and then that obviously will diminish the value of your home. So
Right. So let's maneuver into the role that the dogs have in mold detection. So what's an advantage of bringing in a dog versus, I guess the more traditional route of a person with like a machine or however else a person would do it?
yeah. So first off, I would say accuracy, because the dog's going to be, from what we've seen, like over 90% accurate. And
Hmm.
obviously nothing is perfect, but I think, if I took anybody to Las Vegas and said, hey, this machine here pays out 90% of the time,
Right.
like you're sticking your money in there.
Yeah.
And then speed. And so we've even gotten a complaint online. It was like, yeah, they came in and they spent like 30 minutes here, and it wasn't very long. And I mean, the house was like 1,200 square feet, so it
Hmm.
doesn't take long for my dog to work odor in that size of home. And then they said, well, we had another dog come in after them, and they were here for 2 hours. And I'm like, you're causing problems. Like at two
Yeah.
two hours to work 1,200 square foot, like the dog's gonna get bored. They're gonna start what we call a false alert. They're just gonna start
Yeah.
indicating, because it's like I don't really know what I've been here a really long time. So I would say, if there was this magic machine, I think anybody would pay for it. If we could come in your house and click a button and it scans your whole house in 10 minutes, I think
Hmm.
most people would be fine to do that, right? But
Right.
I think because it's a dog, there's still some kind of awareness that needs to happen, but accuracy and speed are your two number one things.
Yeah. And what does the training look like for a dog that is training to alert to mold?
So for the dog, it just really depends. So it depends on how old they are, what the breed is, how quickly the dog can kind of pick it up.
Hmm.
And then I would say the most important component to it is really outside of the dog. It's really in the handler,
Hmm.
because you could take, I could train, or somebody could train like the world's most phenomenal scent detection dog you've ever seen, and hand it to, my wife, or somebody that's never ever worked a dog ever.
Hmm.
And even with like the hot thing now, a lot of dogs popping up, their handlers have been through like a 40-hour trainer course, which is
Hmm.
that's not even close to enough time to be able to actually learn how to read a dog's behavior. And if these handlers aren't being told to actually how to train their dog, they're going to be missing so much mold. So it's really important that the handler learns how to properly train and how to read a dog.
Hmm.
And that could take, I mean, in my opinion, I think, your basic handler course should be, 4 to 6 weeks probably.
Hmm.
So a lot of them that I've been seeing pop up lately they're like a 1 week course, 40-hour course, Monday through Friday.
Right.
So I took 5 weeks when I got my police dog. And I learned everything from dog psychology to classical conditioning to the actual like dog's physical makeup to how their nose works to how they break scent down. I learned how to train properly.
Hmm.
I learned how to proof the dog off of odor, right? So that means if I'm training my dog on a certain type of mold, am I always training that in a petri dish or like a plastic tube, or am I training it on cotton balls? Well, the dog's nose will break each one of those scents down separately. So if I don't set out cotton balls that don't have mold odor on it, or I don't set out dishes that don't have any mold on it, then the dog's going to she'll start alerting on people's Tupperware drawers,
Yeah.
right? Because it's full of plastics, and the dog knows, oh, like my mold is always, it's in cotton and it's always in plastic. And
Hmm.
so they'll start alerting on those things when there's no mold. So,
Right. That makes sense.
it, yeah, most importantly, it's the handler over the dog.
Have you had any preferred breeds? I feel like the dog I've seen in one of your videos is and I might be wrong, maybe like a doodle mix of some sort.
So Zia was our first dog. She's a Drathar. She's the
Okay.
kind of brown and gray one that
Okay.
likes to paw at things and has the kind of like beard.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she's a Drathar, which most people don't know what that is, but it's most commonly associated with like a German Wirehair Pointer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so then we had another dog in training. She's the brindle one. That was Remy. So she's a Dutch Shepherd.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you guys seeing an increase in need for whether it be handlers, dogs, or both?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, the mold dog it's becoming a popular thing. And I mean, rightfully so, because, we kind of already touched on it. They're much quicker than traditional testing and
Hmm.
far more accurate. I come in behind people that have spent thousands and thousands, sometimes $20,000 on air samples and have no idea where the mold is. And we come in and within 10 minutes, my dog's finding it in their pantry. So it's becoming a popular thing. And you'll get some good dogs, but again, I think the handlers really need to kind of focus on getting proper training from somebody that is longer than just a week.
Hmm. Now, when you go into a house, you said normally you go up, you kind of get a backstory, you get a little bit of information. And then when the dog comes in, are you leading the dog kind of room by room? Is there a certain tactic or a certain like floor plan that you follow whenever you do go into a house with the dog?
So I think every handler is going to be different, but what I do is when I first go into a house, I don't give her her search command. I don't tell her anything
Hmm.
because I want to see where she pulls me and where we go on her
Hmm.
own. So
Hmm.
she's trained to find what we call the source of odor. Like what's the biggest, source that she can find. So I just want to see where she goes. Um, she'll take me a lot of times, like if it's a one-story house, if there's not a big issue, 9 times out of 10, it's like straight to the front load washing machine. Because
Oh,
most people know, like I leave them open, and those things are horrible for harboring mold.
yeah.
And so when you have this big open tube, like with the door open, like all that odor is just coming out.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's to there, or it's if they've had a leak, like she'll pull me straight back through the house, like to the master bathroom, and they're like, "Yep, like my shower leaked a couple months ago." And so, yeah, it just depends. But once we kind of do that, and I kind of let her feel the space and get out pet smells, she wants to check out pet beds and pet
Hmm.
toys and things like that. Then yeah, I go back kind of room by room and work the odor basically.
Okay. If I or if a homeowner was wanting you to come in, is there any advice you have? Like, I would think, maybe don't be cooking when you come over, probably don't have any candles going. So, do you have any like guidelines or advice for someone who's going to have a mold dog come over?
Not really, right? So I want to leave the space like kind of similar to the most that it's going to be when somebody lives in it.
Okay.
So I like to have the AC on because I like to have it, if there's odor in the AC, if there's mold in the AC, I want that blowing out because I want the dog to be able to pick that up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, our biggest thing is just pets, put the pets outside. A lot of people, put them in their car in the garage and let them running and they'll like, hey, I'm going to hang out in the car while you guys work, or some people want to follow us around. But the biggest thing is to prepare for is really just pets. Because, like Zia, she just wants to play. And
Right.
so we want to, when she goes in, we want to make sure that she focuses and we do a thorough assessment. And then afterwards, yeah, if you want to, she can play after.
Yeah. And then let's say you guys do find mold. Let's say someone else maybe comes in, verifies. Do you have advice for people on what to do if you find mold? And I'm sure that that looks different for everyone if it's like a small patch versus maybe a whole room is riddled with it. So, any advice there, especially if someone is maybe just very budget conscientious and they can't do a full remediation?
Yeah, and so that kind of goes back to, in Texas, we can't have a remediation company. So that's
Right.
why I always recommend having an IEP come in. And, he's the one to write the protocol anyways. So they can kind of come in and say, okay, now he doesn't have to spend a ton of time, which equates to money for the client, going through and doing his testing and poking holes in walls, trying to guess. It really narrows down, okay, the dog has signaled like, it's here, it's here, it's here in these places. So, he'll do some cavity testing or depending on what it is, if he can use a moisture meter to check, moisture in the wall or something like that and narrow it down and say, okay, now we can write the proper protocol to get it remediated for the client. So it saves the money.
Hmm. And any advice on preventing mold growth? Like, I'm thinking, my shower leaked. Do I call you or do I do something within a day? How would you approach, let's say, if someone had a leak in their house, whether it's shower, kitchen sink, roof, whatever it might be?
Yeah, so number one is you need to stop wherever the water is coming from. So whether it's leaking from somewhere, you have to stop the leak. So once you do that, then you have to remove the moisture. So floor fans, like you have to get everything dry. Preventatively, I would say the best way to prevent it is just like your normal maintenance, right? Make sure the caulking's behind your bathroom sinks and your kitchen sinks on the backsplash. Make sure the caulkings are good. Make sure your windows are caulked. A big issue I see is siding. You know, where two pieces of siding meet up on the side of the wall. A lot of times they'll separate, or they weren't caulked at all, and so every time water is hitting that wall, it's going inside the home. I see a lot of mortar that's missing on the bricks by the windows. So if you have holes in your mortar, you're probably getting water in the wall. So a lot of preventative maintenance. Pay attention to a lot of those things on the outside of the house, because one of the things that I do, I walk around the outside of the house and look at what do things look like. So preventative maintenance is definitely key, but stopping the water and getting it dry as quickly as possible.
Okay. And tell everyone where you guys are located and the areas that you service.
So we are right in between Dallas and Fort Worth. We are most busy in Texas, obviously, because that's where we're based out of, but we travel nationwide. So I've gone as far as Montana, I've been to Maryland, I've been to Florida, Tennessee, Oklahoma. We're getting requests for South Africa, Hawaii, Canada, UK. So we're getting requests all, which, I think would be pretty pricey trying to get a dog in and out of another country. So,
yeah,
if somebody wants to pay for it, then we'll absolutely go. But that's going to be, I think, logistically pretty tough. So.
Right. And what's your website and your social media handles?
Yeah, so everything, our website is Mold-Dog-Knows.com, and it's KNOWS because the nose knows. And then all of our TikTok and Instagram and Facebook is Mold-Dog-Knows.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us. It was informative. And if anyone's listening, hey, you can hire him no matter where you're at. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was fun.
Thank you for tuning in to the Canine Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at canineculturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.